kind of also interesting to like sort of note how you play sets and stuff like this on monotone boards. Obviously these guys aren't deep, but sometimes I will play like a bottom set type of holding a little bit more cautiously against a field better.
All right, vlog 214, cruising on in, listening to the latest episode of the Crush Live Poker Podcast. Actually, just a phenomenal episode by Bart Hansen. I was captivated when he was talking about this hand where he had aces and he value bet the turn, and he was actually kind of convinced the guy was going to fold. So he actually says, if you call, we'll check it down. And then the guy calls, but doesn't say anything, whether or not he acknowledged the check down thing or not. You got to hear about that hand. If you want to get 25% off for life, I think it's the best poker training material that's available anywhere for live poker games. Specifically, you can use the link in the description below. Closing in on June 19th. Gonna make this cross-country drive. Kind of dreading doing it, but I've always wanted to do it. And if I'm gonna do it, I want to vlog it. So gonna have a lot of great videos hopefully made as a result of that trip. The only thing that I know in terms of places I can stay on this trip for free is going to be the first stop of the trip. I know that in Wendover, Peppermill Wendover, if I jump into the poker game there, I will get hooked up with a free room. I really want to know, are there any other places around this trip? I mean, planning on going basically St. Louis up to Cincinnati to Pittsburgh to Philly to Atlantic City down to DC, Maryland, and then back across the South. I'm just wondering, are there any other places where I can talk my way into getting a free room? It would just really help because I'm going to get obliterated by the cost of hotel rooms on this trip. So if you know anything like that that might help me, let me know in the comments below. As for right now, poker, Peppermill booked a substantial loss yesterday. I actually don't think that I've run worse in 2023 than I ran yesterday. I only booked a $2,000 loss because of the fact that I cut the session to 4 hours, realizing how bad it was going. I just got the hell out of there. So that was rough. Don't think I have run that bad in quite some time. Gonna try to bounce back in the 0-5-10 game starting today. I'd show up to Peppermill at 11 a.m. to find a game with 3 more OMCs in it than I'd like, though there was a glimmer of hope when I looked at the calling list, indicating that help was on the way. The first hand I'd play of any consequence would come against an Old Man Coffee. When, as can be typical in these types of lineups, we get a limp fest. Since I was in the winner's straddle and no one raised, that meant that despite the fact I was in the low jack, I got last action. I have pocket tens. I decided to make it 7x here. Folds around to the player on my right is my only caller. So with 170 in, the board comes out ace, ace, 4, 2 clubs, and then something that I didn't expect happens. He leads out for $40. Not great news, but given that price, I didn't figure I could relinquish. So with 250 in, the turn is an offsuit 3, and now he bets out again, this time for $90. This probably should have been the end of my journey here. But it wasn't. I'd make the call once more. And with 430 in, the river is the 6 of clubs, bringing in the front door draw, and he wastes no time jamming all in for his last 300 or so. My cards hit the muck, and I was left to wonder if there was a chance that I actually had the best hand before that river hit. But against a player that nitty, it remains unclear. Since raising to 70 resulted in me getting action, the next time I had a playable hand, and we saw a few limps, I'd raise to 75 on the button with ace-queen. The straddle would then ship all in for his last $205, and obviously I call. He did the I'm not showing my cards until I'm physically forced to thing after the board ran out, and it turned out we had the same hand. By the way, that guy would then try to argue Super Bowl history with me. That's like trying to argue chess with Bobby Fischer. I told him to put some money on what he was arguing, and, well, he cowered away. I'd lose a few small pots, and then I'd raise to 35 when I'm cruising down the street in my 6-4. My only caller was a young guy on the button, so with 85 in, the board comes out jack 4 deuce 1 spade, and I follow through here, betting 40 with middle pair. Button doesn't take too long for making the call, so with 165 in, the turn is the king of diamonds. I didn't figure I could get him to lay down a hand like ace jack here, but I certainly felt like I could get him off a hand like 7s, 8s, or 9s, so I fire 1 black chip. And he starts saying how he thinks I have a set of jacks, and he tosses his cards into the mug. I can do this occasionally, and part of me wants to apologize for doing it, but I'd lose a big pot in which I got bluffed on the river. Now, the guy who did this falls into the category of player who is likely to watch this and act like he doesn't. So I'm not going to show what he got me off of because he was so incredibly ecstatic with the fact that his bluff worked. I don't want him to know how big of a hand I laid down, but he did miss his flush draw, fire big on the river, and it worked against me. All right, back by popular demand.
That's me.
How does it feel to know that it's now reached the point where people are saying, you know, Ben, can you just indicate in the description at what point Kayla's going to be in the video so I can not watch the rest of the video?
My goodness. Well, Ben, maybe you should try harder at your bid.
Now, my Vegas Golden Knights, that's a hockey team, are making an epic run. I feel like you should don some like medieval knight-like attire coming up soon in honor of this.
In honor of it? Well, I do like to play dress up. Let me see what I can whip up for you all.
I would then call a $35 raise with 9-7 of clubs from the cutoff. Button calls, and with 145 in, we go 4 ways to 7-8-9, 2 diamonds, giving me top and bottom pair. Original raiser doesn't bet, and it gets checked to me. I make it 50, with the button being my only caller. So with 245 in, the turn is the jack of spades, putting 4 spades out there. I bet 110, and once again, the button, who is far from a tight player, decides to make the call here. So with 465 in, the river is the queen of spades, and I check. Obviously not a good card for me. He doesn't think too long with it before jamming all in for $425, just under a pot-sized bet, which I found to be super polarizing. I just didn't think that he'd make this play with just a 10 in his hand. I really assumed he would size down to get paid off by a similar hand to the one I have, so I was kind of torn here. But based on this particular player's propensity to bluff, I decided that it would be a good spot for him to represent something to get me off a hand, kind of like the one that I have, should he have just been in there with a one-pair type hand or missed a draw as well. Unfortunately, there was also a flush draw that got there. I just wasn't sure how he'd have a hand that contained that flush draw. So my thinking was, if he didn't have a 10, that I should be making this call. And I decided to do that, creating a $1,315 pot, and he shows ace-5 of spades for runner, nut flush, and the pot gets shipped his way. Sometimes you have to go a long way to reach your destination, and that was one of those times. So I make the wrong decision on the river in back-to-back hands. As a vlogger, it's tempting to just not show that, but whatever. I'm assuming everyone watching this has done the same thing at some point. This is a mid-session update. I may be getting my ass kicked, but the good news is my Vegas Golden Knights are doing the opposite of that. The Reno Steamer, whose level of obnoxiousness regarding his sports bets knows no bounds, had been touting the Edmonton Oilers as easy money all year long. And going into Game 6 of that series, he still said, you know who's going to win tonight. You know who's going to win tonight. You know who's going to win tonight. And after the Golden Knights won that game, I came in the next day and I said, well, looks like you were right. So I rebuy 1,500, and I was now in the game for 3,000. I'd hope that winning a small pot with queens off an OMC would be a spark. I'd donate some of that money back, though, when I 3-bet jacks and got not 1, not 2, but 3 overcards. And I would obviously lose that pot. But the good news was I'd finally get to table change. As the game had developed on table 5 an hour before, it had Mr. Z, Mr. C, and Ms. T, which meant that that was definitely the main game. I pick up a decent hand in that game and open $30 under the gun. Big blind is an older gentleman who min 3-bets me to 60. Kind of weird. I don't think long before 4-betting him, and I decide to make it 155, trying to keep hands like 9s in there. He thinks about it for a second and calls. So with 310 in, the board comes out Jack 6-3 2 spades, and I bet 175. He barely thinks about it for a minute, and unfortunately mucks the hand, pretty much ruling out kings, queens, and maybe 10s. So I won that hand, and was in the rock, and I looked down at pocket kings, making this a decent pair of consecutive holdings. This game had a ton of action, but in this hand it would fold all the way around to the big blind, who might be the tightest player in the game, who tosses in $5. I just raise it 15 more here, thinking he would muck if I added 20 total. He calls. With 40 in, the flop is queen jack 3, and with that being a flop that I could likely get some action from, I bet 25, which is over half the pot. He check calls me here, so with 90 in, the turn is a 7, and he checks once more. This time, I bet double the amount of the previous street, and once again, he's not going anywhere. So I'm feeling pretty good about this hand, up until the river came the ace of spades, and up until he decided to bet that river. I don't know this player overly well, but I feel the odds of kings being good here are about 1 in 100. I throw them in the muck and found myself wishing there was a way to formally submit paperwork to request a different river card. Had some bad ones on the day. I didn't lose back almost 500 over the course of 2 hands in which I got dealt ace-queen suited in both hands. How about this? There are 4 father and son duos that I can think of that play in our game on a regular basis. And on this afternoon, I saw something I'd never seen with any of those, and that is a big confrontation between the two. It came when this man, Brian, did what, by the way, I can never do, and that's win a hand off his dad, Joe. It was more than a $4,000 pot, boat over straight, slick was in the hand, and he had the same straight, and he got away from it. But a big win for Brian. I then play a hand where I apparently was worried about the wrong guy. I opened pocket jacks and got 3-bet to 125. That was the player I was worried about when Mr. C and Mr. Z cold called the 125, and somehow I managed to check fold a 9-high board with jacks, and Mr. Z had flopped a set of 7s, so it was kind of one of those disaster averted hands.
Slick is back. Now, the way I understand this, you went to Vegas, and you have like the shortest Vegas trips of anyone I know. How long was this trip?
Well, I took off, at 9:30 in the morning. Checked into my hotel, early check-in is 11. Stayed the night, late check-out is 3 o'clock the next day. So I save on an additional night, and I avoid the taxes and the hotel fees. But I stayed too long, is what I found out.
45?
Did you end up at the Spearmint Rhino?
What now?
I have no recollection. But I was driven somewhere and thoroughly enjoyed myself and came home with just a couple of bucks. So whatever transpired, we'll stay in Vegas.
I already had aces and kings, so I figured it was time to give queens a shot. Under the gun had limped, and Slick had the rock on my right. I made it 60 in the low jack, and both of them made the call. With 185 in, the board came out 10, deuce 5, 2 clubs, and Slick leads out for 100. Based on the fact that his turn play can go in a lot of different directions, and not wanting to barrel hands like jack 10 out of the pot, I just call, and under the gun goes out. So with 385 in, the turn pairs the 10, which was interesting, but he wouldn't bet it. Make it 150 here, and sure enough, he calls. So with 685 in, the river is an 8, and he checks again. Now Slick can be, well, slick in spots like this, and is certainly capable of check raising a 10. So I figured I needed to stick to my plan of betting small to get paid off by his marginal holdings. I make it 200, and he snap calls, creating a $1,085 pot. I show my hand, and he mucks. It's always nice when you make a set and are up against 2 pair. Had it happened against 3 of the players in this game, I would be back in the black on the day. But in this case, it happened against the shortest stack on the table, and I simply added $200 to my stack with my set of 4s. I'd win several more small pots as my session winded down, including one where I made aces full on the river, and I bet it big, hoping I was against the case ace. Turned out I was only up against a pair of 7s and a missed flush draw. My plan was to bail when the Golden Knights game started in Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals against Dallas. I'd actually still be playing when they scored the game's first goal, but would watch the rest at home. Unfortunately, the result was not ideal in that particular game. Ollie, though, didn't care. But as for Table 5, I'd wrap up the session having picked up aces, kings, queens, and jacks during the 2.5 hours I was at that table. And I guess I went 2-2 with those 4 hands, en route to booking a loss that wasn't as big as it could have been.
All right, too windy to wrap this vlog up outside, so I'll do it in the car, booking an $825 loss. Not too often where that kind of feels like a win, but that was the case today on a day where I basically fucked up back-to-back hands. Made an incorrect laydown on that hand in which I do not want to reveal to this one player what I folded, and then I paid off when that other player, not known for his passiveness, went runner nut flush on me. So I screw up both of those hands. If I had obviously made the right call on the first one, the entire day would have played out differently, but so it goes sometimes.
All right, wrapping this up, do me a favor, hit those like and subscribe buttons if you are new to this channel. It certainly helps things out a lot, and I genuinely appreciate it. We've gotten a decent amount of questions/comments that are interesting over the last several vlogs, but I'm going to save them. And what I mean by that is I just have this vision of during one of these long stretches of open road in the middle of America, I'd like to drive through that stretch of countryside discussing some of the things that you guys ask or bring up in the comments on this vlog. So do me a favor and go ahead and contribute to that. Ask anything that you feel like is worthy of discussion, because generally we do a question of the week segment at the end of these vlogs for those of you who enjoy sticking around to the end, and I think it's been fun over the last several years. But as I said, I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to save it for a particular stretch of NV to AC. There may or may not be a vlog next week, because I just have to be honest with you. If my Vegas Golden Knights manage to lose Game 6 after this vlog is released on Monday in Dallas, and lose Game 7 on Wednesday and complete what would be the biggest meltdown in the history of conference final hockey, I may not be able to compose myself enough to do another vlog, because I'm going to be on massive fucking tilt.